Hey, I'm Al Dare. Welcome to Mickey's Bait and Tackle in North Syracuse, New York. And we're going to talk about the walleye offshore bite for fall and spring. And some of you have probably read in the Angler magazine what I've written about that in the Oneida Lake section. But today we're going to show it to you on video. Let's see what we have here. You know, if you go back to the beginning of the 20th century and you see some of the old pictures of Oneida Lake and some of the walleye fishing that went on back then, it was always at nighttime. Lanterns circulating around that lake, finding walleyes. Why is that? Well, that is because walleye are basically nocturnal creatures. They love the dark, hence the eyes. They're very good at night vision. And you can capitalize on that at certain times of the year by casting offshore certain lures and certain baits. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's do that. You know, Mickey's Bait and Tackle has been around for about 65 years, and we kind of have an idea of what the walleye fishermen expect in order to be successful on Oneida Lake. And again, the nighttime bite in the spring and in the fall can be extremely productive. We'll talk about the best times to go and where to go. I find that the best time is usually just as it's getting dark, and that would be this time of year, November, somewhere around, let's say, 6 o'clock or so. And they'll bite right through the night. They'll bite right up until midnight and beyond. So best case scenario, you want an onshore wind blowing into you a little chop on the water. That blows in the bait fish. Hopefully there's not too many bait fish, because these little critters, they love to feed on shad, and sometimes it can be just a little overwhelming, especially if you have a heavy shad bloom, which can be the case in some years. You're competing with them. You want some bait fish there to attract them, but not too many. We're going to talk about some of the lures that you should be using, and basically stick baits. These are floating lures. Everybody's familiar with the old gold standard Rapala. This would happen to be a number 11 in a perch finish, because they feed on perch as well. But a lot of these stick baits that float are just a ticket for the offshore walleye bite on Oneida Lake. Shallow divers, you know, by now most of the weeds are gone. You don't have to worry about snagging weeds. If you're in a deep area and you can throw a countdown bait like an X-Rap, that's great. Sometimes that's what it takes. You have the Smithwick Rattling Rogue, you have the Rapala and the shallow Shad Rap, and our number one lure, which would be the Challenger Minnow. This thing is amazing. It's what we call a high-tech boutique sort of bait. It's got a lot of flash to it. We sell a lot of these because they work. And the Storm Thunderstick's always been a good standby. I find that when I put some of this fish allure, it's like a tape that has scent in it. When I attach it to the actual stick bait, it gives the ability of the stick bait to give off a scent. When you spray your lures with something, that usually washes off. And don't overlook the good old Mr. Twister. Sometimes when they're not on the stick baits, you want to throw a Mr. Twister, let it go to the bottom, and reel it in nice and slow. And slow is the word, especially when reeling in your stick baits. Painfully slow retrieve is where it's at. You do not want to throw these out and just rip them in. Let them just come back to you nice and easy. You can do a stop and go. That helps a lot. If you're fishing in deeper water, let's say off the dock at Sylvan Beach, you can even throw like a blade bait. This happens to be an XPS Bass Pro Laser. These are amazing at times. They can really help to save the day. They sink like a rock. You kind of need deep water to fish these. Now, when you're out there throwing lures, all you really need is something like this. You don't have to bring your whole tackle box. You can bring about a dozen lures in something like this and be prepared for just about any situation. The most common mistake that anglers make is when they're casting these light stick baits is they're using too heavy a rod. They're using their bass rod or their walleye pike rod for open water, which is usually rated for, let's say, 10-pound test, 8 to 10-pound test. With these guys being so light in nature, if you really want to get the distance with them, use a long, light action rod, like about a 7-footer that's rated for around 6-pound test line. You're going to get optimum distance. You don't really need to use more than 6-pound test line when fishing for walleye offshore at night. Some people like the new no-stretch braids as well, and the finer diameters. Like this happens to be a 10-pound, 2-pound diameter. This happens to be an 8-pound, which is about a 2-pound diameter. Don't go anything lighter than that when you're using your braids, otherwise it turns into spaghetti. But it can be a very exciting time to fish Oneida Lake walleye, spring and fall, offshore. So we're going to talk about some other things down the road here. To the offshore walleye bite on Oneida Lake, there's certain pieces of equipment you're definitely going to want to have. Obviously, a hat with a light on it can be very, very handy. This little light actually slips off the brim of the hat. It's a little LED job. Boy, it can be just like amazing not being able to see what you're doing otherwise. So, secondly, a pair of forceps on a zinger, which clips to your shirt or your jacket, and then you want to have a pair of line clippers as well. That's also a clip maybe to the zinger. This obviously for taking the hook out of the fish's mouth. It comes in very handy. And then for cutting your line, especially that braid stuff. Boy, that stuff doesn't cut very easily. And you're going to want a stringer. Obviously, let's be optimistic. The stringer can be attached to your belt, okay, that you would wear. Or let's say you're not wading, and we're going to talk about wading here. You can have just a bucket and everything off to the side. But if you're going to wade, let me just emphasize a few things about wading. Wading at night can be treacherous, okay? I do not advise going wading in an area that you're not familiar with. If you're going to wade in an area, let's say off of Oneida Shores or somewhere, or Lower South Bay, you want to go there during the daytime and you want to familiarize yourself with the area that you're going to be wading in. Otherwise, you could be looking for trouble. And if you are wading, this is a net that would come in very handy because it has a very short handle and it has a lanyard that you can string across your shoulder so that when you do catch a fish, you can just scoop it up and throw it on your stringer, okay? If you're offshore, if you're on a dock, like at Godfrey or Sylvan Beach, you'd certainly want a net with a longer handle. But these are the basic types of equipment that you're going to need to be successful as a walleye angler on Oneida Lake with that offshore bite at night. Hey, thanks for being here. Get out there. It's been sort of an okay year. We've seen better years. There's a lot of food in the water for them, but I'm hearing reports that people are catching them. You might have to work a little hard for them, but boy, I'll tell you, when you do succeed, when you're in the right place at the right time, it certainly can be memorable. Thanks again. This is Al from Mickey's Bait and Tackle saying take care, keep your line in the water.